Chris, I've known you over the years,
Yes.
a very long time, and I was impressed that you came out and told people that you had Asperger's, because before people used to go, oh, Chris Packham, he's a bit of a character.
Yeah, that wasn't the only word they used.
Yeah, well, no, I wanted you to say it, though, but you were.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
You were eccentric, you were kind of didn't fit in, didn't
quirky,
you?
and some of those quirks were directly related to the condition. And as much as I evolved a method of trying to, suppress and perhaps mask those quirks, it doesn't always work, because you're trying to do two jobs at once. You're trying to manage yourself and make the Really Wild show, or whatever it happened to be at the time. And so sometimes the guard would go down, and and then people would think, oh, hold on a moment, this guy's something not the same as us here, But ultimately, Janet, you know what it's like? I've been very fortunate to have been given a small voice because of the work that I've done on television and elsewhere. And I think that, therefore, I have a duty to use that voice to try and make things better for other people. And, it's very difficult for some members of the autistic community to articulate the way that they feel and the problems that they have, but also, critically, the benefits.
Yeah.
Because there are assets to Asperger's. There are certain skills which I can manifest which other people can't. And I hate the idea of the, loads of people out there not able to have fulfilled lives, play a role, simply because there isn't a wider understanding of the condition and a degree of tolerance in society. So, I had a duty to stand up for all of those people that didn't have that voice.
You were diagnosed quite late, weren't you?
Oh, yes, yeah.
But what was it like for you when you were younger? Because I think people just see the word Asperger's or autism, but what they don't see is what it's like for somebody to live like that. So what was it like for you in your
Well, I
younger
grew up
days?
in the 60s and 70s, of course, when the condition wasn't known outside of a few medical practitioners. So it was a very different world then. It wasn't something that my parents knew or understood, or any of my teachers. As a young child, it wasn't too bad, but it was when I got to my teens and running through university to my mid-20s. And to be quite honest with you, it was really, really tough.
You said it was a dark hole, and there were suicidal thoughts at some points of your life.
Yeah. I mean, it was extremely isolating. And initially, of course, when you don't fit in and you're being picked on, you blame yourself. So there's a lot of self-doubt and there's a lot of self-persecution. You don't think that because you're the minority, you expect the majority to be right, and therefore everything they accuse you of, you stand accused of, and it's your fault. So, you do retreat into your bedroom, draw the curtains, read depressing poetry, and ultimately make the whole thing worse. And by the time I got to university, my only way of dealing with the situation was to, blank my peers completely,
Well,
pretend they
didn't
didn't
talk to
exist.
them. You
I
didn't
didn't
even
know. I
talk
just
to
went with
them.
this. I went, I started day one and I thought, I'm going to get through this. I want an education, but my only method is to not engage with these people at all, because from previous experience, it had all been dangerous and destructive. So I would say 20p please twice a day to the bus conductor for the first couple of years. And then I have to say that some of my fellow students, by the end of the third year, I made contact with a couple of them, or about 3 of them, to be quite honest with you.
So what point did it get to where you thought, was it you being aware there was something different and going to get it diagnosed, or did somebody...
No, I mean, by the time I got to that stage, which was my mid-20s, and I started the Really Wild show, I then, I'd left university, and I'd sort of thought, well, if I want to make a career out of this, I've got to function with other humans, which is something that I'd avoided doing. So I used to make lists in the hotel room at night when I was starting the Really Wild show of things that I needed to do in order to make my role functional, and so that I could work alongside these people. And I began a sort of self-training program. And by the time I was diagnosed in my 40s, I'd been working with Janet, and that role was working.
Yeah.
You channeled all that obsessiveness, didn't you, into how you did the show, all the facts you knew about, and you were so knowledgeable about your subject. Well, you still are.
Well,
passionate about it.
Yeah, the passion is one thing. I mean, the knowledge, one of the benefits of the condition is that we have good retentive memory and we have good pattern forming skills, so we see connections between things which strengthen that recall. So, and of course, in my job, that's an asset. So I remember things that I read when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I talk about them on Springwatch. So, So being able to recall things that way, and that's not a skill that's unique to me. That's something which is a trait which is quite common in the autistic community.
You've had some pretty outrageous opinions in your time, haven't you?
Well, I think another one of the traits is that there's no grey. We're just black and white. You know, there isn't any middle ground. We love it, we hate it. It's good, it's bad, it's right, it's wrong. There's no ambiguity. And and equally, very often, I don't really care what other people think. Particularly when you've learned.
You could be a loose woman if you want.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think it's important that you stand up and for what you believe in. And if I believe that something's wrong when it comes to conservation, the environment, or the treatment of animals, then I have a duty to exercise my voice to try and spread that word.